Good evening and welcome. My name is Dr. Loretta Frederking and I serve as VP and Academic Dean, and it is really my privilege to welcome all of you this evening. A little bit of attention to detail in that we would like to feature all of you in terms of our social media outreach, but at the same time, we definitely want to preserve your privacy should you choose. So what I would invite you to do at this time while I'm introducing is, if you would prefer to not be identified, please do go ahead and turn your cameras off. And if you're comfortable to know how to do it, please do remove your name as an identifier. But at the same time, we're very available. So if you want to just send a message to Allison, if you weren't able to do either of those things, but you would choose to be removed from any social media connections, please just let us know. We want you to feel comfortable. This is your home. You're back to Brescia. And we want to begin by letting you know that you are in a safe, comfortable, happy environment. And so good evening. And I would love to give you all a hug at this moment, and is not possible, as we know, but we can come together in the finest Brescia way to support each other and to find ways to be connected. So the agony of Zoom and an event is that sometimes we are also quiet before the presentation begins, whereas if we were in person, we would be chatting it up and we would be making those connections. So just know we recognize the unusual times continue. But I just finished taping a podcast with Brescia students who were really celebrating that the campus community is unique. And the campus community is a place where we support other women. And this is testimony to bringing one of our alum back to the community to share with you her wisdom. I believe we've sent her out into the world where she has been to many exotic, exciting places, and she's coming back to share her knowledge. So with that, I'm introducing Larissa Mills. And Larissa is a grad of Brescia University College, 1996. She studied sociology and English, and I just want to pause to celebrate the humanities as well as the social sciences and how they probably have cultivated your passion. I think that when I've learned about your career path, it's exciting. You went on to Niagara University and earned your Master's of Science in Education. You've enjoyed an extraordinary career as a teacher, many years in the classroom. And I think all of that comes from the skills that you probably picked up and learned at Brescia, but at the same time, also the passions to look at the world critically and to understand that you have a contribution to serve the broader communities. Because when I think about what you're talking about tonight and look at your career path, what I've learned is that you, in the classroom, started to pick up on unusual behaviors over the past 10 years, where you recognize that something was happening at the same time that telephone use, cell phone use was rising. You saw unusual behaviors in the classroom rising. And as a mom, you do celebrate that you have 3 children and grown up, as you said, but as a mom, you recognize something's not right about this, that as a teacher, you used your critical thinking. And I'd like to take that back to Brescia, where you learned some of those skills and you began to pursue podcasts that recognize screen time as something where we have a parental and a community responsibility to provide the best opportunities for our young people, which means using technology as a tool, not becoming tied to it in a way where we're seeing some of the detrimental effects. So I'm not the expert, you are, but I know, Larissa, you've gone on to create many exciting initiatives with this passion of yours. And that's exactly what we hope to ignite in our young women at Brescia today. I'm going to pass the square to you, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy. And I invite you to to really share your wisdom with all of us tonight. So thank you, Larissa, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't believe I'm here. It's kind of funny because I think I met almost all of my best friends all in the same year. And I think they were all at my wedding. And I think there's a few of them in here. I can't tell, but they'll probably text me in here and they'll say, oh, brush your hair or move your hair or do something. But it feels like I'm old if I had that introduction. I feel, like I'm coming back with some experience. And I'm coming back with some good memories. And I have to say that I think Brescia gave me tools. It gave me tools. It made me stronger. It made me feel, I don't know, exploratory, I guess you could say. And then I went off and did several things. I actually owned a Pilates studio for 15 years. In between, I left teaching. And then I went back and I wanted to do educational behavioral consulting. And then COVID happened and I was like, what's going on? So here I am. Thank you for having me. And I'm so happy to be here. And I'm so happy that you guys are all interested in talking about this. So I just want to get right to it. And I don't want to waste anybody's time. But I have to ask, I was writing this and I thought, why am I here? Why would anyone need me here to talk about this topic? So I kind of thought for a minute and I thought, well, I know that behavior's changing in young children, older children, and adults. Behavior is changing. How is it changing? As Professor Bell would always tell me, how is it changing? What does that look like? Well, collectively, it looks like what I'm about to explain to you. So I'm going to give you some alarm bells that are going off in education and some alarm bells that are going off in medicine. And I want you to tell me whether or not you think we should be really worried or whether we need an action plan right away. So to start off, I want to say that I know we have technology and we all have it and we can't take it away. But what we can do is we must protect the children. It's coming down to a very simple task of helping them grow and relaxing their minds. And I'm learning a lot about the brain and a lot about how the brain functions and why sleep deprivation and phones and sugar are actually all connected now. So for instance, a couple of things I have to ask, is parenting changing? Is it that we don't have as much etiquette and formality anymore? Is it that we don't have the same parenting styles happening? Is it school policy? Is it that children aren't playing outside anymore? And this is all pre-COVID. None of my statistics tonight are COVID. COVID has just perpetuated all of our issues. And I have to add that the two things I put together between the American Pediatric Association, the Canadian, and the English Association, that if parents are on their phones for 4 to 6 hours a day, and on top of work, and children are on their phones for 4 to 8 hours a day, then that means that approximately families are not spending 960 hours a year together. Now, that is a significant amount of time in a child's development per year. If you times 960 times 18, that's 17,000 something. I didn't graduate in math. So I have to say that we're looking at a substantial amount of mental, social, physical, academic development that is now, we can now say is being delayed. Almost all children are falling below standards. So I want to show you, I created my one list, and please feel free to write down questions. I already had a few that have been sent, and I have more too that people emailed me, but I'll do my little examples for you, and then we'll go over 20 tips for screen routines, and then I'll open up to any questions. And I want you to know too that I don't know how to parent in the digital age. I've had no one ahead of me do it. So I'm just trying to navigate my way through this too. So I think we're all here for the same reasons. Something's wrong, right? Now, the one thing that I did do, I'm actually working on a documentary. And I'm writing a workshop for a film as well. And I can officially make that, I think, in a few weeks. But I want to start off with the medical community. What are the alarm bells going off in the medical community? Well, 1 in 5 children between the ages of 12 and 18 are anxious, depressed, or suicidal. It's not one of the three, it's one of them. More kids now than any other time are sad and anxious, and that's not even including the Great Depression when you look proportionately at ages, right? So children are having trouble sleeping. That is an alarm bell to the family physicians that I've interviewed. The sleep cycles are disrupted. Children are taking their tech to bed. They can't go to sleep because the phone is actually stimulating their nervous system and giving them dopamine, cortisol, and adrenaline from the heart rate going up. Now, I don't know about you, but after you run about 5K, I don't think I could fall asleep for a little while. But that's what that is doing to our brain. So we have to kind of look at, why aren't mom and dad putting child to bed with reading and journals or writing or drawing, and instead they're just letting a phone walk into the room with them to go to sleep? So that is something that the family physicians, even the ER physicians, and other psychotherapists, psychologists are all saying. We're very concerned about sleep right now. Now, psychologists, I have interviewed over 50 hours of people for my book and for my documentary, and the almost every single medical professional I've talked to says the same thing. We are not communicating with our children. We are not spending time with them. We are sitting in another room away from them, but we're not spending time with them. So they're telling us what to do. They're telling parents what to do, because then when I consult parents, they come to me and they say, oh yeah, the psychologist told me to make sure they're sleeping and eating and playing and exercising and reducing their screen time. But the parents aren't doing that. So we have to actually take back that control, take back that, I'm going to actually remove the word control, and I want to say value system. And I want to say health, because that's what we want to do, right? We want to make sure our children are coming out of this with the best weapons available to us in our toolbox. And we're not doing any of that right now. In fact, when I tell you some of these statistics, one day I almost, after a podcast, cried for about an hour because I was so sad that I don't understand why this is still happening in my own mind, right? Now, the highest amount of eating disorders is now, when you look at 3 years ago, there's more now than there were 3 years ago. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? Well, social media is playing a major role in what we see in front of us and what young girls and boys are looking at. There are more boys now with eating disorders and more boys now with self-conscious like behavior than any other time that these psychiatrists and psychologists and psychotherapists have seen. So that's alarming to me, because every time you go to look at your phone, if you take a look, 9 out of every 10 times, you're going to be jealous, envious, sad, frustrated, angry, getting worked up and stressed. There's only a couple of times out of those 10 times that you actually are going to feel good, right? Now, if you look at the high amounts of patients coming into a physiotherapist, physios are seeing injuries that they've never seen in children under 20. These are other alarm bells that are going off in physiotherapy. There are postural balances happening. There's muscular weakness, and children are not developing the same way they were just 10 years before. Now, that's something that really upset me, because why? Well, because they're sedentary all day, and they're on their devices. And this is pre-COVID, not even now, but they weren't going outside to go over to Johnny's to play on their bike. They had to make a date, or they were just doing it on Xbox. And so all these postural balances from sitting like this, or from sitting in a sedentary supine position on your back, caused many imbalances. So the physiotherapy world is very concerned. And then we're going to pop over to the occupational therapy world. So I interviewed 2 pediatric occupational therapists, and they are the leading in their field. One's in Oregon, one's in here. And her list of patients has doubled. And the entire occupational therapist group that she's in, her patient lists have doubled. I said, how? They're kids. How is this even possible? what does this even look like? And she said, well, they can't hold a pen. They can scroll, but they can't hold a pen. They can hold an iPad and get their neck flexed, but when they go to play dodgeball or run or do any of those things, they're falling behind. They're actually getting dexterity issues, fine and gross motor issues. So I couldn't believe that she said that her list for her patients has doubled. Now, that also means now, in 5 years from now, there will be a backlog and you won't be able to get in. So there's a warning sign as well. Then I spoke to about lovely speech pathologists, and one particular, Elizabeth Skirving, here in London, from Fern Speech and Languages. She is looking at collectively at her data, and her data is saying that children are delayed in speech, delayed in sentence structure, and delayed in vocab by 4 years old. I said, how is that even possible? Like, they're 4. You know, they all sit beside each other and talk about jubes or whatever they're doing at preschool. How is this possible? And she said, because they're just sitting and watching an iPad. Some kids coming to JK, which I'll get to later, don't even know what Play-Doh is. They're not working with their hands. They're not doing art. They're not doing crafts. So that is very worrisome to me. Now, the same pathologist, a speech pathologist, Elizabeth, she's saying that kids who are around 17 and 18 that she's seeing don't have executive functioning skills. So she's actually having to double her load of cases for her executive functioning programs because there's volumes of children being thrown at them by parents and saying, fix them. I can't fix them. You fix them. And that kind of made me think, why isn't the parent working with the child? And that'll come up again, and you'll see why in a minute. Now, I interviewed a few other occupational therapists and a few other physios, but they are the head of what they're doing. So these collective bodies of each respective organizations are talking. Now, I'm going to get to the most important part to me in what I'm doing is psychologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, family physicians, and ER physicians. Now, ER physicians see triage. They have never seen the amount of children brought in by their parents coming in saying they're depressed or suicidal when someone just didn't like their dress on Facebook. Now, that can't be addressed in an emergency physician room. That is a talk. That is, let's go back. Let's look at the basic. That is a family doctor issue, and that is something that needs to be talked about. And coping mechanisms. Again, parents need to talk about coping mechanisms. So the family physicians are saying that they have never seen this amount of children coming in who are sad, anxious, depressed, feeling alone, isolated. They're like, well, why aren't you hanging out with your parents? Why aren't you doing things together? Take the phone away from them. Let them have less screen time. Take them outside. But this is the highest. And I want to say, I think they said it was 1 in 6 kids between 9 and 18 that are depressed. That is worse now than still the depression. So we have to look at our numbers and what those numbers are trying to speak to us to and trying to say to us. So when you look at psychologists, the average psychologist now has a 2-year waiting list, and this was prior to COVID, not COVID. Now it's going to have 4 years, they're telling me. So how is my child who is upset in front of me going to get help now? Psychotherapists, psychiatrists, they're all booked for years. And those bookings are telling us that something is not happening within the value of the home. Something is not happening within the home. And to add to that, the one that really upset me the most was he's a pediatric neurologist in Cleveland, and he is doing a podcast with me in 2 weeks. He is a neurologist there, and he is studying and MRIing the linguistic part of the brain, which is right here. And he's MRIing all the children, and he is categorizing how much screen time they have. Now, the kids that have less screen time, they don't have gray matter in their brain. It's working, the synapses are firing, and everything's good. But as soon as you go above 2 hours a day, just 2 hours a day, this part of the brain in children is now showing signs of delay, not working. And they're between, I think he said under 14, I think mostly are under 8. And they're delayed in speech and delayed in vocab. And what I think one question I asked him was, does this mean early dementia? Absolutely. He goes, you're going to see a whole generation of people around 30 years old who are going to have dementia. Now, that to me is also an alarm bell going off. Now, if we look at adults, and adults are also, we have to consider their failings and their values and how they were parented and all these things that come together. But 1 in 5 adults is actually depressed in Canada. And we have to look at why. Now, parents have a little bit more coping mechanisms, they have more emotional skills, they have a little bit more resilience, and they have more weapons in their toolbox to deal with things. But this sedentary lifestyle gets stimulated in the brain is not healthy for us. So if we're not healthy, we're at this end of the bookend holding up the books and our children are at the other, and we can't seem to hold these books up. So we need to help both ends to make sure these children are healthy and can go out into the world and be productive human beings, right? Now, I have a bunch of links that are all on my website where I have all of my statistics. And I think it comes down to being quite simple. The psychologists, psychiatrists, the family physicians, the pediatricians, and everyone who I just mentioned says 2 things. You have to actually shut off your phones and connect with your children. We must connect. Connect with your friends. Talk. Instead of texting, talk. Instead of looking and saying, oh, well, just look at my phone whenever I want. Change your phone to work for you. That's what we're really talking about. Now, when I look to education, I just got a few more here. This is a whole other different set of alarm bells, which is my area of expertise. So in education, when I spoke and interviewed all staff, so all the different teachers, coordinators, social workers, principals, administrators, superintendents, not in this board, I'm talking everywhere, and in England and in France and Quebec. So I tried to really get a grasp of what was going on and not just here. So the JKSK teachers really concerned me because they were saying that kids can't compromise, communicate, concentrate. They're not clear, they're not concise, and they're not coordinated and can't cooperate. So I said, whoa, 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 whoa. That's a lot of C's. And then it kept coming up in the older teachers and then in the high school teachers. And I've interviewed Fanshawe College teachers and I've interviewed professors from Western as well. They are all saying the same things. We don't have coping mechanisms. We don't have communication and we don't have concentration. We need to start looking at our curriculum, if I were to give myself an action plan, and change that. We need to change our policies and change what is being made in doing and happening in those classrooms. Now, the other alarm bells that went off when I interviewed was absenteeism. Children, I remember when I was a kid and I was in school, we're like, oh, where's Johnny? Johnny isn't in class today. We know Johnny. Johnny, where's Johnny? Ooh, I wonder what happened to him. And we all would wonder where these kids are because only 1 was absent in class. Now make that 5. In a high school class that I was observing in, 7 kids were absent in 1 class. And the teacher, I asked them, where are they? She goes, I don't know. Some come and they go. I tried connecting with home. I don't know what's going on. And they try and help, but they can't. There's just too much going on. Now, the kids are staying up late and they're gaming with other kids from Japan, or they're having contests and tournaments. It's crazy. And they're staying up till 3 or on their phones. And then they get up at 6 with only 3 hours of sleep and they go to school. So they're tired. That's part of the reason why they're absent, right? So the other thing that's happening are late arrivals. I have never seen the amount of late arrivals in schools since I was a supply teacher in the last few years, going around, I would have to keep restarting my lessons several times, over and over. And this delay is happening in every class because of the distraction of phones. I don't even want to get into what phones are doing in the classroom, because that's just a no-brainer. The teachers want them out. So, and there's no learning going on there. I have to say it's basically, they're about learning 30-40%. And instead, before, they were probably learning 90%. So we're really not teaching children to absorb information the way that we actually, our brains are ready for. Our brains are actually retaining 60% less information than only 15 years ago. Well, I have to say, where did all that 60% go? It's in here. It really is in our phone, and we're not really retaining as much information or comprehension for that matter. Now, if we look at the relationships in the school, it kind of made me sad when I talked to a few of these high school teachers. They were crying. And I said, why are you crying? And they said, because we just want the kids to talk to us. We want the kids to go to the dances. We want the kids to socialize and go to clubs and activities. And now they're walking around like zombies, like whatever. So in Quebec, I'm speaking to the principal next week who banned the phones in her school. And she said that it was the best decision that school has made in 10 years. Because all the kids are back into their respective clubs. All the kids are back into sports. And the parents surveyed said that sleep was now happening. Phones are not in their room. The school did it as one huge community. Now, I know that we have to look at detention, suspensions, expulsions, and violent behavior. Combative behavior is way up as well. The highest it's ever been is now. But what worries me is that combative behavior is occurring when a teacher actually wants to take away a phone. So there's where a lot of the disruption is. And another alarming little alarm bell that went off is the principal told me that they're banning parents from schools because parents have become so irritable, violent, aggressive, and yelling, and they just won't tolerate it. And I never knew that you could ban a parent from a school, but apparently it's very common now. That would never have happened in the 70s and 80s. Not very often. And it would have been a handshake or it would have been a talk. It wouldn't have been this uncontrolled emotion in a situation. So if your child goes to school with the phone, by the end of the day at 3 o'clock, there are 230 texts by the end of the day. 230. I think I do 20 maybe in a day. I don't know. I know that they take an average of 35 selfies within a class by the end of the day. That is really, really pushing the child towards a very narcissistic-like behavior. And we're allowing the children to do it on our time, which is educational time. And we are the experts, and we know that this is not good for them. So we know that what we should do is take those phones out. Now, I know that there's so many students have actually in surveys said that they actually want the phones to be removed in the schools because they don't want to look at them, because it actually causes them anxiety by 3 o'clock, which I was shocked when the kids volunteered it in an anonymous way. And when you talk to the kids, they actually say, well, my teacher just says I can go on my phone now because I'm done my assignment. And I kind of thought, I would have worksheets, crosswords, reading books, fun games, and all those things available for kids when they were done a unit test or something. I would never let them on a phone, and I still don't. You have to occupy your brain in some way. And Dr. Collier, who I interviewed from Manhattan, is a psychotherapist, and she says, we don't know how to just be. When we have a moment to just sit, we just fiddle, and we have to look because we don't know how to just be for 1 hour. And that was a challenge I did for some of the parents in my Facebook group. They had a really hard time doing that because our brains are actually scientifically being changed to work with our phones. And it's almost like, I don't want to Pavlovian, the dogs ringing the bell and going in, but it is. So we want to undo that. And we really want to change this trend in education. And we really want to change this trend in medicine, because these scores, math scores, test scores, and academic testing are all at an all-time low. They're skewed, but the average is lower. What really worries me too is the comprehension and reading comprehension that learning coordinators are telling me about. We need more social workers, they're saying. We need more psychologists in the building. And in England, they actually have that all at their disposal. By the age of 8, a child gets a psychological development assessment. And there are no phones allowed in the schools at all. They have actually less mental health when they're older because they're taking care of it when they're younger with parenting counselors, social workers, etc. Right? Now, some of the other, what my last alarm bell is the athletic one. When I've coached now for over 25 years. And when I see kids coming in to try out, I almost have to reteach a skill, and I almost have to reteach a drill. And I shouldn't have to at the level that they're at. And I almost see a lack of coordination, a lack of strength, a lack of endurance. And I asked a whole bunch of coaches, and I asked an NCAA coach and pro hockey players. I've talked to sports psychologists. I've talked to Olympians, and that's all in my podcast. But they're saying there's a division of athleticism. So this division is essentially all the athletic kids over here who are cross training, who are in multiple sports. And then we have the children over here who barely move off the couch, who don't eat properly, who eat too much sugar. They're either obese or they're underweight. So we have alarm bells going off all around us. And I have to ask you guys, do you think that's enough alarm bells? Because I think I talked for like 14 minutes. I think if I timed it right. Now, this is a time where I'm switching gears. And if anybody wants to ask me a question, I'm going to give you my screen routines and my screen tips for children. Some of these are in my book that'll be out in April. Some of these are on my YouTube channel or my website or my articles, but I'm going to go through about 20 of them. And if you have a question, I don't know if I can see it here, but maybe Allison can open up and maybe tell me which questions there are. I do have about 4 here that I know I need to answer, and I hope I can get to them as concisely and as effectively as I can. So I'm going to give you tip number 1. Tip number 1 is they need sleep, and you have to get every single electronic device out of the room. And depending on their age, if it's too late, it's never too late, by the way. You can taper them off, but get them off their devices an hour before bed. And keep those devices on the main floor. So if we're keeping those devices on the main floor, there's a lot of advantages that aren't when they're up in their rooms and I can't see them, because nothing good happens out of your sight. I can tell you that. You can actually introduce in their sleeping routine journals, drawing, make up stories, but there is no technology in a room whatsoever. And the newest product that I have to actually say is poo-poo is this one little Bluetooth product called Calm. Now, what this does is it's like an Alexa, and the mom brings it into the room with the dad, sits it down beside the bed. The parents go out, they're on their phones, and the Alexa talks to the kid and puts the child to bed, not the parent. That's not what I think I want my value system to be. And that's where parents have to choose. What value system do you want? Because 30 days in your household will have a completely different change. If we do all of these changes, there'll be a completely different kid. The second little tip I want to give is simple. Put an alarm clock in the room. Just a little alarm clock, one that has a very loud buzzer. Very, very loud, because they won't argue with you to get a phone in the room because they have a clock. And I would start it at 2 or 3 years old. I don't know where your kids are, but I've had the battle with the alarm clock in my own household. It is not fun, but I have to say I won. So there is no arguing. But the alarm clocks actually allow them to feel they can get up on time, and you want them to be accountable for themselves to get to school, depending on the age. The third thing that's the most important, if you're buying a phone, if you're buying a phone, install a control app. Why? I get this question all the time. Well, you put a seatbelt on a kid in a car and you get the right seatbelt. You put a bicycle helmet on the child going outside. This is the same thing that can open your child up to numerous types of cyberbullying, rude language, sexting, nude photos, luring, pedophiles. You don't even want the trafficking that happens on gaming consoles is mortifying to me. I had no idea until I talked to a specialist about it. Now, when you install a control app, make sure that the app has a control feature on the social media, specifically, starting from the youngest age up. Because if we only let them on there for a few minutes a day, it's enough to connect with the kids, but encourage FaceTime, encourage talk time with their friends, encourage them to go out with their friends, encourage them to hang out with them. But sexting will happen, texting will happen. We don't want that. So talking, remember Dr. Hutton said they need to talk. We all need to talk. Now, one of the things that Dr. Hutton said, the neurologist down in Cincinnati, he was saying YouTube is one of the biggest culprits of delay. And I said, what? Really? I mean, they don't watch much YouTube here at all, except for, I forget the guys, these guys that do these tricks. They're kind of funny. I like these guys. And it's said because if they just watch and don't move, don't talk, don't think, their brains are not working. Nothing is connecting. And this is the best time in their lives for them to grow. Their brains are not done growing, especially the frontal lobe, the frontal cortex, right? They can't make decisions yet. They can't do anything yet until they're 25 almost. We know that. So YouTube is something I would actually really eliminate off the whole iPad. It depends on what you have, but I would eliminate it. Now, the other item I would say is you have to sit down and engage with your child and talk to them about what is polite talk on a phone, what is rude talk on a phone, and what is etiquette. So really sitting down with them and going over boundaries and your values. How are you going to install and implement your values into your rules? Because that's basically what's happening. Now, you also have to talk to them about my sixth tip is talk to them about the bullying. If you see bullying, Sarah, you have to tell mom because it's not right. But what does bullying look like? Bullying can look of one of 10 things. Harassment, physical harm, defamatory libel, physical threatening, life-threatening, harassment, threatening of nude photos. I could go on. Those are all different types. I have an RCMP officer that is doing a podcast with me in 2 weeks, and he was going over all that material with me. And I was like, what? That's a lot. He goes, yes, and it's illegal. You can't say these things to each other. And he said, you would not believe the things that 10-year-olds would say. I was like, what? 10-year-olds? You've got to be joking me. They can't say expletive, and I'm going to kill you, and I'm going to come to your house. But it's nice because these kids have a screen in front of them. They don't have a person in front of them. So it's eventually, it is leading to more violence. But we have to actually teach our kids what bullying looks like and how to stand up to it. If you want to actually talk about bullying, it's a long conversation, a very long conversation. And then on top of that conversation, you've got to talk about self-talk. And parents, this is where psychologists and psychiatrists are all agreeing. We have to teach self-talk methods. So if we're not teaching self-talk methods, we're not giving our children coping mechanisms and the ability to use our inner voice. Because guess what? Your inner voice is your best friend your whole life, right? Your whole inner voice, what you're saying to yourself. Now, my eighth tip is talk to your children, don't text. Phone them and talk to them. Hearing is healthier. That's what Dr. Collier's saying. She says, hearing is healthier. And that is something that resonates with me. And it's kind of funny. Now my kids call me. They don't text me, they call me. And I'm kind of like, I'm winning. I'm winning this, and I'm happy about it. Now at night, when they go to bed, and it depends on the age of your child, but I still do this myself, is nightly mantras. So a mantra can be anything from I am strong, I am resourceful, I am powerful, I am patient, I have superpowers. Anything that gravitates to you here and here that you can use before you go to bed. And I used it with a couple of my kids when they had bullying issues. And within a week of talking to themselves, they got a little cocky. That talking changed their minds and changed their self-esteem and changed the way they looked at their issues. And I have a self-taught course available on my website for any age, I believe. And there's one for adults too. Now, number 10, gratitude journal. Dr. Sharma talks of the kindness journal. This is a gratitude journal for everybody where we write down what we like, what happened today, what you're thankful for, what you want to achieve. But the more we write, the more the linguistic part of our brain is working. So the gratitude journal, and maybe my kids do, well, I don't know if they still do, but they were doing it, a gratitude list before bed. I am thankful for having a lunch today. I am thankful that I got to see my grandpa. I am thankful that I got to go tobogganing. I am thankful that I got to go ice skating. Those things that actually reintroduce that thought into their brain that it is a good thing. And that is something we can all do. Now, people are asking me, when is a good time to use a phone for a kid? I would say that it depends on the child's age. It depends on their routine. It depends on what activities they have, but you pick an hour, 1 hour, and have a timer and have that timer shut off, and it's gone. And everything gets docked at night over in the docking station. No one has phones in their rooms, and this is the new way, I guess, we have to live. New healthy habits, right? Now, the last few are for, I'm just frozen here, are for older kids. So no phones in their cars, right? No phones in their rooms, and no phones, especially in their rooms near 10 p.m. because nothing good ever happens after 10 p.m. on a phone. Actually, nothing. The research says that their brains become less controlled and they can't make those decisions. So they actually make reasonably less and less likely the least moral decision after another, again and again and again, until after 3 a.m. So we want to make sure that they're not sending those nude photos and that they're not sending inappropriate photos, because that's when it's happening. And one dad came to me about 2 weeks ago. He found over 200 photos of his daughter, right? Nude photos that she was sending. So you have to check their phones. That is number 14. 83% of parents don't check their phones. And we have to check their phones because, believe it or not, this can get you into some very serious trouble, parents. So make sure that you are controlling it and make sure that you legally are teaching your kids how to use it, because it's not a babysitting tool. It's a tool, right? So bonding time. This is my favorite part. Spend time with your children as much as you can in the evenings, on the weekends, and build their trust and build your landing mat with them. I always ask the question, are you your child's landing mat? And the parents say, what do you mean? Well, do they come to you with all their problems, or do they go to their friends? And more children now are actually going to their friends for problems because they don't have a relationship with the parent. It's just sort of robotical. And it's just sort of sit down, eat, clean the dishes, and go into your room. So we're really not bonding with our children anymore, especially brand new moms who have babies. They're the most at risk, actually, from all of this. So bond of security and attachment has to be formed by 8 years old. Several of the professors at Brescia taught me that. This is a very important stage of development. If it is not developed, these behaviors kind of creep up in different ways in behaviors that we don't understand, but it really is that something's bothering them and they're not getting some validity somewhere. And we all want to be valued. We all want to have someone to listen to us, talk to us, and hugs are number one. I'm going to recommend every day hugs. Hugs actually restructure our polyvagal nerve and our brains. And it is so important to get a hug. The longer the hug, the better. So hug away, but not during COVID, unless it's your bubble. So you want to make sure, right? Now, the other few things are that will help reduce screen time are setting meals, making sure they exercise, making sure that you're listening. And this was something I had to learn 2 years ago. I had to change my parenting because if you have 3 kids, you are 3 different parents, right? You are 3 different parents to 3 beautiful beings. And you have to find out which parenting style works with them. And I had to change the way I was listening to the one child and listening to the quietness of that child because they're more of an introvert. So I had to listen to bond. And that really was a whole pivotal point for me in my parenting story. So when you're talking to your kids, don't criticize, don't judge, and don't put them on the path that you consciously want them on, because they should make their own path and you got to support them. And if you give them the autonomy to do that, they will go and thrive. They will just be beautiful beings, and they will be so happy and confident that you gave them that independence and that confidence to go and do that. Now, considering the landing mat and the bonding, and a child can be on their phone for an hour. That's kind of 2 hours in after school that you have to think about. Now, the other thing I like to add in is listen to music in the kitchen when you're cooking. Use those tools for the right reasons. Put the music on. My child was 9 years old and put on jazz. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he just went, and because it was his DJ night when we cleaned up the kitchen. And I said, where did you get jazz? He goes, oh, Spotify. I was like, what is happening? And he learned from his older siblings what that was. So playing music more improves the linguistic part of our brain. And we bond over music and we can listen to it. But quietness actually isn't that good for us, right? In some ways it is. But when you're looking at technology, it's not. Now, the last tip I'm going to give everyone, and I do in my other talks, is routines. We need routines. We're creatures of habit. Speaking of creatures, I have a little kitten here. I know she's right here. We have to have routines. Routines from the moment we get up. Routines about meals, routines about exercise, because routines give us a feeling of security and protectiveness. So they actually give us boundaries and times and consistency that your family will thrive in. And if you are doing that, awesome. And the way to reduce the phone use is actually to implement routines. And I have consistent parenting methods that will help with that. So those consistent parenting method courses are actually on, here she is, are actually on my website, and they're for all ages as well. So I just wanted to finish with those screen routines. Now I have a couple questions. Allison, did you want to ask the first one that you had there?
Sure. So we had one that was with COVID and social distancing. My teenage son's social life exists online.
Right.
Xbox, playing online with friends.
Yeah.
With classes being online, he spends a significant amount of his day online. Is now the time to limit his screen time when that is the main way he connects with his friends? How much is too much for 15-year-olds?
During COVID is different. 1 hour a day is still the limit, but he's going to school and he wants to socialize on the gaming console. First of all, I would say make sure you know all the names on the console, whoever that parent is, because 2 people last week found out that there was an adult on their console impersonating a child. So I didn't know that until a few years ago myself. I would actually say, can he FaceTime his friends and can he talk on the phone to them, and encourage always FaceTime on a phone. Encourage anything where there's talking and seeing expression versus texting. So we want to make sure that we are giving them better tools for their brains. This is a better choice. Limit the gaming and limit maybe to an hour of socializing, because he's still got to go to school as well, right? And do his work. So that would be my best guess, but I don't know his habits or what he does. So I think that's probably my best answer. Definitely go to FaceTime and talk as much as possible, and hug them as much as possible. Hug them and hug all of them. They may not want it. Just give them a pat, whatever way they feel comfortable. So
Is there
go ahead.
I was just going to say, is there any follow-up question for the person who asked that question? I don't want to call you. I don't want to call out the person. They're on here. I know that.
Okay.
I hope that answered the question. Did you want me to read the other one that I got submitted?
Yeah, because I don't have, yeah.
So we recently let our 3-year-old listen to some of his favorite shows on wireless headphones rather than watch them on TV. Are audiobooks or audio shows any better than watching TV? Does the elimination of the screen cause them to develop better imagination capabilities or require them to think more critically about what's being said?
Absolutely. So there's 2 questions there. First one that I heard was the audiobooks. Anything without a screen when they're listening is way better for their brain. Way more imaginative, way more creative, way more stimulated, beautiful. Now, they said, actually, I should probably review that. TVs are probably the most passive form of watching a show, if you want to watch a show. Then the more addictive form of watching a show is on an iPad. The most addictive way you can watch something is on a phone, right? So if you had a choice between a phone, an iPad, and a TV, go with the TV and the audio as well, because they can side play, and that's very important around 3 and 4 years old, because they're just starting to interact play. So they need a lot of imaginative, dressing up, tea times, feeding their dolls teacups or whatever they're doing. They can play while they're watching, if that's helpful. And actually, to add to that, usually I bet you it's a favorite movie and they watch it 47 times. So like Moana or whatever for that age or something like that. But it's funny how it's the same movie, this one mom said, and this daughter likes to listen to the songs in headphones. So that was kind of interesting. So yeah, definitely audio is always better with no screen. Children under 6 are actually not allowed on a screen from the Canadian and American Pediatric Association. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Those are the only questions that were submitted to me ahead of time. So I know that someone submitted questions to you directly. So I'll let you take over there.
Okay. So the first question I have here is, when is a good time to get a phone? Well, I want to back up. I usually, if you're looking at getting a phone, I would be very careful about that, because it probably means they have an iPad. So stick to the iPad. Try not to get a phone. We try and hold off until grade 9. That's the most popular. But because these older siblings are getting these phones, the younger siblings are being left out, and parents are falling into that trap and buying that younger sibling a phone. So now they all can be quiet and they all can have their time and you can have peace. But actually, it's more of a rite of passage. So grade 9 is typically when you get a phone. Grade 9 is when I would do, even earlier, I would do the control app, go over the boundaries and your value systems in your home with that phone as well. So that's the one question I had. So I hope I answered that, whoever that was. I did have another question about bullying, cyberbullying. There was no details. How do you handle cyberbullying? Without knowing details, like specifics, like threats, harassment, it could be sending or blackmailing of nude photos. It could be anything like that, or just being mean. There's lots of things you can do. So the one thing you can do is, what social media app was that on? I'm going to bet it was on Snapchat. I'm going to bet that it was on Instagram, and that you can probably not find it again in Snapchat. So if I was setting my kid up in a phone, I would actually encourage my child's whole village or cohort to go to a WhatsApp. Because WhatsApp, you can look back and see the quotes and the discussions. Whereas Snapchat, you kind of have to get a little bit more tech savvy and you have to kind of work your way back to see the Snapchat text. If it is life-threatening, if it's just kids being jerks, that's different. I would address it with the parents, and I would make sure that if you are addressing it with the parent, that you have all your facts and that you've waited 48 hours to talk to the parent and calm down. Go with your statistics or your facts and say, I just want to have a chat. I think that there's something going on, and even just do a probing session. If you know the other parent, say, hey, Sally said, okay, she was seeing some stuff on Snapchat. Have you been hearing anything, or have you been seeing anything? Have you checked their phone lately? There's the first 3 questions I would always ask, because if you are checking their phones, you can see who's talking pretty quickly. So those are some of the things that I would do for the cyberbullying. And the second question I know to that usually is, if there's cyberbullying, is it transferring over to school? So if the bullying is actually happening on board property, legally, it now also becomes a board issue. But here's the thing. I've been doing this for almost 25 years, and almost 80% of bullies, the parents don't make any changes. That's really high. Unless you have the evidence, you do it in a formal setting, and you can actually express and be very, I want to say, factual and speak to the points and not the passion. Because you want to protect your kids, but also you want to also give your kids those mechanisms and coping mechanisms to cope at school and how to deal with it. But when you're in that situation, the principal's office or wherever you want to meet, sticking to the facts is always best. And I find those would get resolved on a much higher rate of resolution than normal. So those are something that I would actually have to add as well. That wasn't a cyberbullying question I had, I think, from my website today, whoever that was. So does anybody else for you have another one?
Yeah, I have one here, which is kind of a bit of a follow-up to what you were just talking about.
Okay, go ahead,
Did any of your research interviews explore the different social media apps? Specifically, I'm wondering which apps are having more detrimental effects on youth.
Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram, in that order, I think. Now, TikTok also has a lot of privacy issues. Instagram, you really have to control it and keep it a private account. I would not let children on until they can really navigate and say back to you all the values and all the rules that you have given them. So if they can actually explain and understand everything, I wouldn't be letting them on a social app. I'd let them be on a WhatsApp with their friends together, but I wouldn't let them download any app, I don't think, until they're much older. So I don't know the age of that child, so I don't know how to speak to that. I'm seeing girls in my research being bullied 30% more than boys, which it really was interesting to me. And the majority of the bullies were girls. So that really, I was dumbfounded. I really was. That was a higher percentage than I thought when I was looking at the material. And 1 in 3 people have been bullied, and 1 in 4 have been cyber bullied, children under 18. So those are kind of those stats there for under the Canadian bullying administrator. So do you have another one? Because I have one here.
That's the only one, unless anyone else wants to send me a question. Those are all the questions I've received so far.
Okay, so I had a few here. There's just one more. This woman is very frustrated. The gist of her question was, my daughter keeps ignoring her siblings, going on her phone, and she's in her room all the time, and I can't get the phone away from her. And I said, well, take the phone away from her, and it's your phone, and install a control app and give her set amount of times to be on it, and go back to your routines, go back to your consistency, go back to your value system. Start playing games. I think we've played President maybe 1,000 times during this COVID. Or we played, what's that game? Code Breaker? I don't know. Playing with them and getting them all into something. Paint night. And do it slowly. Build up slowly, because you have to taper her off. I do have a 30-day phone addiction program that you can use to taper off. But when you're tapering off, you have to increase your time with them. And actually, it'll increase behavior. So it's a win-win in the end, if that's your concern with that. So do you have another one, or do you want me to keep firing? Okay.
I have no more here.
Okay. So the other thing was the nude photos. Now, do you want me to answer that one, Allison, or is that this is going to be on, this is recorded. So.
I mean, if people have a question about it,
Okay.
I mean, obviously
Yeah, so
don't get into detail.
I would say that this is a two-tiered issue, nude photos, because if they were down on the main floor with you, they wouldn't be sending them. If you're leaving them in their room with the phone, they wouldn't be sending them. Now they could go to the bathroom, and that's what some parents are telling me they're doing. But let's teach our children to value their bodies and to value their privacy and to value their intimacy. Well, how do we do that in an age where everything is out there? It's all about your headshot. It's all about your Instagram account and all about this and filters. And I'm like, try swimming. Try putting your daughters in swimming, because they get great self-body images out of swimming. Put them in sports. Healthy diets actually help breed a healthy body-mind shape. And remember, some parents, you want to criticize them, but don't. I mean, don't criticize the body, their image, their hair, whatever. They're going to have their own style. So just kind of what I want to say is, let some go, let them have their own style, but teach them how to be virtuous and have integrity and dignity. And that's something that starts at a very young age, right? So the nude photos are they're probably 50% of what a principal deals with at school right now. Breakup photos are a whole other kettle of fish. And the grade 9 popular photo is the big teen cult, which is probably a whole other seminar I could do on that. So yeah, but that's all I have here. So that was my last question. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll give one last shout out, as if anyone does have a question, either you can take yourself off mute and ask Loretta a question. I mean, so not Loretta, Larissa, or if you want to share it privately here, or ask Loretta. Maybe she's learned a lot and she can answer a question tonight. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up here. I'll just give a second for anyone to
go for it,
to do a question, in case you do you have one last question. But I don't see anybody writing to me right now.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, we have Sister Noreen.
Sister Noreen.
No, hi there. No, I really appreciate your energy is coming right through. Your passion is coming right through the cyber reality here. But I was just curious, did you have like a key experience, like something that was a real turning point for you to say, I have to dedicate myself to studying this and educating people?
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing it?
No, and that's funny. That question comes up quite frequently.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
I was at a hockey rink about it was a middle child. Okay, so 5 years ago, I think. And there was a mom standing on her watching, sort of like, it was at one where you could watch the ice rink below,
Uh-huh.
right? So you were looking, and my child was playing her child, opposite teams. And then I noticed she went over to her husband halfway through the game and said, "It's my turn to be on my phone."
Oh.
And I kind of went, "Well, why wouldn't he be watching?" He was on his phone sitting with a 3-year-old or younger girl, I remember, and she was having headphones on an iPad. And she was very, very poorly behaved before. So he went over and said, "Well, when do I get my screen time? Are you doing bath tonight?" And I kind of went, "You're fighting over your screen time when your kid," and I learned later that that kid was one of the best kids on the team and scored a goal. And they were arguing about that and missed their son's goal. And then later on, the son comes up, this boy, cute kid, you know, fortunately we beat them.
Oh.
But watching this exchange of fighting over screen time and ignoring your children is simply what made me want to do this. But I had seen hundreds of other changes in behavior in kids in schools.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, for sure.
So I do have one last question that came in.
Fire it up.
You mentioned children should spend about 1 hour on their phone maximum per day. How much time should parents be spending on their phones?
Haha. Interesting question. Well, I'm going to go with the scientific answer. A lot less than we think we are. So what does that look like? Well, for every hour that you're on a phone increases your heart rate, adrenaline, cortisol, and actually causes you to gain weight. So I would say that if you're on a phone as an adult, I would do it quick and short bursts, because the phone over time causes the dopamine, cortisol, and adrenaline to cause those spikes and to cause our nervous system, our polyvagal nerve, like our nervous system going, and we can't relax our brains. And one of the newest parts of research is actually how Dr. Cheever, in working with Dr. Collier in New York, was seeing how the phones were setting off our heart rates and causing us to have stimulation and anxiety. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe the study. She actually had videos of it and how it was actually stimulating us. So especially for parents before bed, to get yourself away. And actually, I found writing to be much more cathartic and helpful to organize my thoughts in my day and what I had to plan. So because I had a problem with my BlackBerry when it came in, like, when did BlackBerry come in? Like 2007. And I started to realize I was working too much, and I had to stop, and I had to set hours, and I had to set times. As soon as I set my own phone up to work for me, and so I wasn't getting notifications about bad things all the time, I became happier. And I try not to go on my phone ever in front of my children. If I do, I leave the room, or I'm working on a laptop. If I'm working, I'm on a laptop. If I'm on a phone getting a map or something, I say, "Hey, can you guys get me the map?" I'll ask them to do it, right? Because they have to know that it's also a tool, right? So I don't know if that answers your question. Less, definitely.
Well, thank you so much, Larissa, and good evening, everyone. My name is Melissa Nada, and I'm a board member on Brescia's Alumni Association. On behalf of the board, I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us this evening for what was a very informative session. It's our goal to create engagement opportunities for our alumni, and we hope that you all enjoyed tonight's session, and we look forward to connecting with you more throughout the year. Larissa, thank you so much for offering to host this event tonight.
No problem.
Your words were
Wonderful.
Your words were an important wake-up call for all of us to make changes now so that we can ensure a healthier future for ourselves and the next generations. We are so very lucky to have you share your expertise with our community, and we appreciate it so very much.